In the last episode, I travelled to Suffolk to meet up with Windmill Bob to look at, yes, windmills, though we didn't get that far in that video, and I stopped off at Saffron Walden en route, and there met a couple of local reprobates who showed me the castle. Oh, it was all good fun. In this episode, we shall explore the beautiful Suffolk windmills with Bob, so let's get cracking. Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer, and this is my quest for England and Englishness, its landscape, its heritage and nature. It's a personal journey and I'll document it for all to see. So come on, join me and let the quest begin. Our first port of call in this heavenly Suffolk landscape is the Thelnetham Windmill, probably as rural as you can get and very much tucked out of the way. The excitement of spotting my first mill for real, so to speak, was quite palpable.
This is Thelnetham Windmill in the village of Thelnetham, which is just on the Suffolk-Norfolk border, but we're still in Suffolk. And this mill is 202 years old, built in 1819 on the site of an old post mill. So this used to be a post mill dating back to the very late 18th century. The post mill was moved, which is quite a feat, to Diss, which is a big town not too far from here, and it took 6 months for this windmill to be built, and it opened its doors on Christmas Day 1819. So the mill has been here ever since, and as you can see it now, the mill was restored by a group of volunteers and owners from the very late 1970s. The mill was built in 1979, and the mill was returned back to working order as you see it now in 1987, when the sales turned around for the first time and ground corn for the first time in over 50 years. So the mill now is owned by the Suffolk Buildings Preservation Trust. They also own a water mill nearby in Pakenham, and they also own Little Hall, which is a lovely old timber medieval Tudor building in Lavenham, which is about half an hour from here by car, and it's been owned by Suffolk Buildings Preservation Trust from about 2013-2014, and is managed by them and looked after by volunteers, and Tuesday is Volunteers Day, and so the volunteers here today are just basically tinkering around doing what they can and what they want to do to keep the mill going.
Although obviously purely agricultural machinery for the otherwise arduous task of grinding corn, I find their design, look and principle supremely beautiful and a joy to behold. There is something undeniably romantic about windmills. These remote tall structures scattered in the landscape, stoically milling for the benefit of man, human ingenuity at its most creative. These majestic marvels must be looked after, preserved and kept for future generations to learn from. I find it humbling that man can invent such machines and harness the elements for so humble a task as milling corn for bread and animal feed. Bob's very kindly taken me up to the top of the windmill,
Called the dust floor.
the dust floor, and in front of me is the mechanism, the main gearing mechanism that the wind shaft comes in, and you've got, what's the big wheel called?
That's called the brake wheel.
The brake wheel.
And it's got a brake pad at the bottom as well as the top. And the top brake pad gets lowered down to actually put the brake onto the actual brake wheel itself. And just here you got the horizontal cog here called the wallower, which actually drives.
The wallower.
Wallower. He wallows.
He wallows.
But the brake wheel engaged in the wallower.
Yes.
The wallower is attached to the top of the upright shaft. It basically runs the rest of the machinery.
And so that's your main revolving unit shaft
yeah.
that drives ultimately the stones that grinds the corn.
But the wind shaft turns the wind into a mechanical energy.
Yeah,
so.
And I mean, must be one of the oldest forms of energy producing mechanical devices known to man. I mean, that and water.
Yeah, I mean these were agricultural buildings, you know, and they kind of still are regarded as agricultural buildings because they were serving a purpose to produce flour.
Yeah,
from grain.
To make bread the staff of life.
Absolutely.
Which is why these things are so important, and it's just, you know, you may not fully understand and comprehend everything about a windmill or any of these old type buildings, but you know, there's so much to learn, but they're just so important that we have them because they go back to our origins of using a mechanical aid to help the human progress to where we are with digital nonsense of today.
Well, even last year, I mean, a dozen or so working windmills and watermills in England were just flooded with demand for flour because supermarkets ran out of flour. And so people are like, oh, there's a working windmill in our village that they've been ignoring for the last 20 years. All of a sudden knocking on their door saying, can we buy some flour, please?
Yeah, what an irony, eh?
Yeah. So windmills actually came back into real importance last year. And watermills, though, not watermills, because they also played a major part as well. Because watermills can operate all the time because you can control the flow of water assuming there is water, whereas wind you can't control wind.
No, and sadly we have no wind today.
Apparently so. We've run out of wind in England.
We've run out of wind, so there we go. Bob gave me a comprehensive tour of the Felnetham mill and all the machinery, too complex and confusing for me to attempt to relate here. Although the mechanism is extremely simple and basic in reality, it's the scale which inspires you. The handmade, individually furnished cogs and hoppers and chutes, braking systems, and the use of natural energy, like gravity, is mesmerising. Adjacent to the windmill is the engine shed. In the 1920s, steam or even diesel engines came into use to assist the miller when there was no wind. These two fine volunteers operating this marvellous beauty of English craftsmanship did explain how the engine worked. Now, see if I can remember. Using compressed air, it moves the piston to squash the diesel and therefore ignite it. I think that was it. Then this firing up gets it going. The big flywheel maintains the energy to repeat the process while the governor regulated the speed. It was something like that. The upshot being that a wheel drove a belt that was attached to the mill and turned the stones. Although the revs were quite slow, or is it that there was little energy produced? I'm not quite sure, but the torque was great, meaning that it could shift the heavy millstones easily. And to determine how stable the unit was, well, there you can see. What a thing of wizardry it all is. We said goodbye to the valiant volunteers at Felnetham and the magnificent windmill to continue our exploration of these sentinels of the open landscape of England. What splendid fellows they are. We headed to the border and crossed into Norfolk.
Richard, can you reach into my glove box, please, mate?
Your glove box?
Yeah, because I've got my passport in there, because we're just about to come into Norfolk. And,
oh, really?
Yeah.
What, you mean we have to show our passports?
Yeah.
Oh, I see you got yours.
Yeah, it's very usable.
But this is one of those red European rubbishy things. You want to get a nice blue one, mate. That's what you want. passport. I don't know. Luckily, when we came to Checkpoint Charlie, I managed to persuade them that I was actually a Norfolkian. I don't know. We're going to get something to eat.
Norfolk and good.
So where are we at the moment then? And pub called the Horseshoes.
Yeah, we're in Billingford, which is just over the border in Norfolk. So we've emigrated for about half an hour.
Just for the food.
Just for the food and a windmill.
And a windmill. Lunch is over. Very nice bacon burger, delicious. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
But we're not getting back in the car because just round the back of the Horseshoes pub is another windmill. Which windmill is it? Billingford we are in.
Billingford, well, it's Billingford Windmill, but it's on Billingford Common.
Oh right, so this is old common land.
Yeah.
Oh, how interesting.
When the windmill was working, well, it's built on the site of an old post mill that blew down in 1859, and this one was built the following year.
1859, so this was built in 1860.
Yeah.
I can work that out, yeah. Oh, my schooling wasn't wasted.
But when the windmill was working, it had loads of ancillary buildings around, and now it's standalone, so it doesn't feel like a proper windmill site as it once was, but it's still, we're very glad that it is still here.
Yes, and so is a preserved mill that's looked after? It's not somebody's house or home?
It's not
or
someone's house. No, it's got all its workings inside. Owned by the Norfolk Windmills Trust since 1965. In fact, one of the first corn mills to be donated to the Norfolk Windmills Trust, which is a charity, but it's kind of run by Norfolk County Council effectively. And it's been in the ownership of the Norfolk Windmills Trust since 1965. Restored a couple of years ago by a local company who I've been doing some work for over the last 6 months. We'll be heading there afterwards, but they rebuilt the cap and sails. So they went on at the beginning of last year, so right at the start of lockdown really, the work was finished thankfully.
Should we go and have a walk up to it?
Absolutely. It's quite a tall windmill. So red brick built, 5-storey tower mill in excellent condition, and it could be put back to working order. All it would take was a bit more work done on the machinery, and we need some more shutters inside the sails, which I'm actually making myself at the moment, so well, not right now because I'm talking to you. But
yes, it's funny though, isn't it? Yeah. So how tall is it?
That mill's probably about 50 feet tall to the top of the brickwork. So then you've got like another 12 feet on top, which is the...
So is that 4 stories?
5.
5 stories, including the ground?
Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant.
So it's taller than the mill at Thelneatham, which is only 30 feet tall, so it's just definitely taller.
Yeah.
And it's quite an exposed area here too, because you see behind us, it's all common land and it's fairly flat. So the Norfolk mills tend to be a little bit taller because it tends to be a bit flatter here in Norfolk.
To capture as much wind as possible.
The wind, yeah.
Great.
But she's an iconic Norfolk windmill, and right on the A road to Great Yarmouth. So it's seen by many people on a daily basis.
Yeah. You sort of get it all with a windmill, don't you? You get the heritage, but also it's not just heritage, it's industrial as well. I mean, industrial heritage, I suppose. And as we were alluding when we were at the last mill, but not on camera, they've been around for so long, and they gave us the grain that was turned into bread that was the staff of life. Something that was so important to keeping us all alive. And I don't know, it's like churches in a way. They're such a monument to the landscape. I mean, in the old days they would have just taken them for granted because they were everywhere.
Yeah.
And now they're a novelty.
I think so. There's fear of them. Up until the 1930s, when there was a massive decline in numbers in, well, not just England but the world really, they seem to be like, oh, we need to preserve some of these mills now, because they're just being knocked down or turned into houses, and it was only until the 1930s that there was a movement set forward by the Society of Protection of Ancient Buildings to actually try and save some of these buildings, as museums, effectively.
Yes, well, presumably these museum pieces need to be repaired and maintained.
Windmill Bob has just popped down the road in this rather delightful village, I've no idea what it's called, to get flapjacks.
Stradbroke
jacks. So we're going to eat those, and then we're off to a workshop.
Where we make windmill parts.
Who would have ever thought that there was such a thing? Well, we're going to go and have a look.
Yep.
Let's go.
Hard to believe that in these seemingly abandoned farm buildings, dedicated men go about building and rebuilding windmill parts. Without people such as these, the splendid edifices that we've been studying would have perished long ago. Millwright Tim told me about his craft.
In here, as you can see looking around, there's all sorts of windmill parts being built, mainly at the moment from scratch, and we're covering nearly all of the country. So you're seeing, this is from Lincolnshire, there's pieces from Yorkshire, there's pieces from Kent, there's pieces from all over the place. So we restore and replace all sorts of bits for various windmills. The answer to how I got into it, which we always laugh about, is a very big can you just?
Okay.
And I was working as a joiner and cabinet maker in the grounds of Friston Windmill in Suffolk when Essex millwright Vincent Pargeter called by to inspect and have a good look at Friston Mill. And he just happily called in and asked, after seeing what I was making, would you come to Ashton and make some parts for that windmill? Which I did, and then I made some more parts and some more parts and some more parts, and then that was that.
And that was it. It became a love.
You're looking at that was 2005. He asked me to come and work for him properly then, but I turned him down because his workshop was too far away, and I was busy and just insecure really. At the distance, it was a big leap of faith. The millwright traditionally would have turned up with his horse and cart, a brace and bit and a saw, and he would have cracked on. But these days, obviously, we've got infrastructure for lorries and cranes and that type of thing. So big workshops like this one is possible.
Yeah.
It's much better for us because we can keep within health and safety rules as much as physically possible, because it's not the most easy for health and safety, our job. Working at heights and
yes.
as you can imagine.
So do you, having repaired these things, do you fit them in yourselves?
We fit them ourselves.
Bloody hell.
Yeah.
That is impressive.
So just behind, you can just see poking its back there is a cherry picker.
Yeah.
Just the other side of the fence, and that will reach 90 feet. And as Tally here will say, he's maxed it out on nearly every job we've done since we've had it.
Wow.
So a lot of working at height.
What a great job. Even Windmill Bob helps out to produce some of these spare parts. It must give great satisfaction.
I do pinch myself sometimes at work when I'm working on a bit of wood, and then I sort of just think to myself, actually this bit of wood is going to be 60, 90 feet up in the air on a working windmill in a year's time, and I've been involved in, it's all teamwork here, because we all help out with each other. So if, I'm just another pair of hands, so if one of the lads needs a pair of hands to do some shifting of wood, I'm there.
Windmills are iconic and inspire awe. I think I've established that. Let's trust that they continue to be valued and celebrated for their role in human development and our survival. They are symbols of human triumph over the elements and are priceless pieces of heritage in our cluttered landscape. While not uniquely English, for me, they sum up England and Englishness so very well. I love and salute them.
We're on our way back. We stopped at Staxted Green Windmill, and got the drone up, did some aerial shots, which you'll see, and then we've just sort of on a long loop back through the countryside, I think, Bob, and we just stopped to have a look at some of the farmland here, because you don't see this in Sussex. I'm pretty certain you don't. The size of the hay bales, or straw bales, maybe they are, behind us, it's like a building. I mean, it really is.
They may actually be building something behind it to
hide from the road. Yeah, you never know. Look, there's a massive tractor just going past.
Hello.
Hello. What are you doing in my field?
He didn't gesticulate us, did he?
No, that was
Get
lucky.
off my land, boy.
The one thing that comes to my mind is Suffolk, to me, is very undiscovered. And I need to come back and explore and pootle around, for a month or so, looking around, maybe next year. So many of these maybe next years that I've got coming up, but it's such a pretty county.
It's very diverse. You got the coastline, and then you got the heathland around Thetford. It's beautiful, it's varied.
And the architecture, the old villages, and there's so much of history and heritage and landscape and nature here. It ticks all those boxes that I'm interested in, and it's very English.
Very.
So thank you for bringing me along.
You're very welcome, Richard.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
We paused at St Nicholas Church at Bedfield.
We saw a sign, church open, and we've been to a couple of churches on this journey, but we couldn't get in, as you saw, on either of the others, and suddenly Bob slammed on the brakes.
Handbrake turn.
This one's open. So, just so that I can at least say I've been inside a church in Suffolk, here we are. And this is a beautiful church. Again, it's a large church, and yet it's on farmland, with a farm next to it and no other houses. The village, the houses are a fair distance, aren't they? So they obviously like to walk to church, but this is again remarkable. Huge arches on the inside into the chancel here, and a bit of a screen which looks very old. Actually, that looks really ancient. Ancient's the wrong word. Old there, and you come through into the chancel, past the choir area, and up to the altar here.
A lovely church indeed. That night I said goodbye to Windmill Bob, and I wildcamped in my van at Badwell Ash, a village nearby. I took a brief look at the place in the early morning before the villagers had risen and walked their dogs.
Standing here in the morning light, looking at the church, it's very arresting. I normally see the church in sort of mid-mornings and afternoons, but so seeing the first light hitting the church is fantastic. We've got the cars thundering through the village now, and actually looking at the church clock, it's 10 to 7, so people going about their business and getting ready for a day's work. But I'm really enjoying visiting, let me start that again. I've really enjoyed visiting Suffolk. What a lovely county. Beautiful, almost untouched villages without all the new builds. Now, it's possible that I haven't seen all the new builds and things, but just these beautiful villages that give you well, an insight to old rural England. I've got to come back. I've got to come back and explore more in Suffolk, and it's just a fascinating county.
Well, that's it for this episode. I do hope you enjoyed it. Big thanks to Windmill Bob. Don't forget to support the channel and I'll make more of these videos. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.